You have somehow ended up listening to The Stuff That's Real That You Didn't Know Was Real, but also is cool podcast. Or Sturty Dickwur Bayik. Or, never mind.
Welcome to the show. I am one half of your hosts, Nick Thacker. My other half over here is Kevin Tumlinson. He is probably my best friend in the whole wide world.
Always a half and never a whole.
Always a half and never a whole. He's one half that makes a whole. We're greater than a whole when you add us together. But one of the reasons he is such a close friend is that we're kind of in the trenches together. We are in the trenches together. We're both full-time authors, and we get to make things up for a living, which is an incredible, amazing blessing to be able to do that. But it's also really hard. And so Kevin's been there with me through thick and thin, mostly thick. And what we're going to do today, and all the other days that we're going to do this, is talk about really cool things. And these really cool things are actually real things, which means they exist in this world that we're living in now, or they're very, very close to existing based on technology and trends and the way things are going. Because this is basically our research process. We go find cool things and we try to figure out how we can mold them and shape them into either something the bad guy gets or something the good guys use to save the world. Would you agree with all that?
I do agree with that, yeah. You know what I like, man? I like the fact that I'll write a book based on research I've done. And one of the comments in like reviews and emails that I get from readers and that sort of thing is, you know, how much they love that original idea, you know, that whole mind-boggling idea. And I actually have like, you know, a stack of articles or something, you know, and all I did was retell the story with my characters. So I will gladly take credit for.
Absolutely. I get that all the time. Usually what my readers will say is, I gave you 1 star because I find this science to be completely implausible. I
love the 1-star reviews.
But what you're going to hear today, listener, is complete and utter nonfiction, which means it's real. This is real stuff. This is really cool stuff, but it's real. And to kick things off, I'm going to talk about a tree.
Okay.
Bring your mind, Kevin, back to 1866. Do you remember 1866?
I do, like it was yesterday.
Like it was yesterday. Well, there was a North Queensland road surveyor named A.C. McMillan. And so he, in 1866, was on the road surveying it, I'm sure, came back and reported to his boss that at some point on the trip, his pack horse was stung by something. And it got mad, it went crazy, and died within 2 hours. In this area of North Queensland, Australia, there is also a bunch of local folklore, mythology that's based on similar tales, like horses that die or jump off cliffs. Even people working in the forest that drink alcohol copiously because they're in so much pain. And all of this pain and jumping off of cliffs and going crazy is caused by a single tree. It's found in the rainforest areas of northeastern Australia and Indonesia. It's about 2 meters tall, and it's called the Gympie Gympie tree. Now, if this Gympie Gympie tree weren't so freaking cool, I would have used it anyway, just sheer fact that it has a cool name. Even if it was just a normal oak tree with cool leaves.
Now, is this where the phrase Gympie comes from?
I have no idea. Now, that's one thread I did not tackle in my copious research here, but I kind of wonder that as well.
Nick.
Maybe a listener can answer that for us if someone's familiar with that term in the etymology. But no, this thing is legit, man. The Gympie Gympie sting is so dangerous that it's killed dogs, horses, and even humans. It's been reported to be the worst pain imaginable. Literally. I mean, you know, and every BuzzFeed article says this is the worst pain imaginable. But this one actually is considered the worst pain humans have experienced. For example, this article that I'm reading, I'll link to in the show notes. It says you feel excruciating pain that can last several months and reoccur for years. So it comes back. The damn thing comes back. It stings you, and it lasts for months, and then comes back year after year after year after year. And one quote in here, it says even a dry specimen can inflict pain 100 years after being picked.
This is a revenge tree.
This is a revenge tree.
I mean,
yeah, like what kind of defense mechanism did this tree have to evolve? Like what was attacking this thing?
You hear about neurotoxins. Some of the most painful and deadliest neurotoxins on the planet come out of the ocean, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So
yeah.
Wonder, Australia is
okay.
an odd continent, and maybe this was at some point some kind of like underwater species.
That is an interesting. I like that. I could see that absolutely being plausible.
This is based on no research, or that part is entirely fiction on my part. I have no idea. I didn't even know this tree existed.
No, I think that's a cool thread though, because right, like what other tree or plant species have you ever heard of that does anything remotely close to this kind of damage?
And why? Like
and
what
why?
purpose
Exactly.
does it serve? Because why certain trees are toxic or whatever.
Like cactus has
usually to protect their
spines.
fruits and exactly.
Yeah,
so that they have a chance to propagate. But wow, that is it's kind of scary, man.
Australia. It's got everything. It's got everything fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, like spiders the size of a house or whatever. Like this is a ridiculous continent.
It's nuts, man. It is. It's so. And here's a virologist, Dr. Mike Lee, is quoted in this article as saying that the first thing you'll feel is a really intense burning sensation, and this grows over the next half hour, becoming more and more painful. I mean, he's letting us in easy here.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's not so bad, right? Then he says, shortly after this, your joints may ache, and you might get swelling under your armpits, which can be almost as painful as the original sting. In severe cases, this can lead to shock and even death. And if you don't remove all the hair, these little the tree has all these little purple hairs all over it.
Yeah.
If you don't remove the hair, they can keep releasing the torturous toxins for up to a year. And someone else said, she was a post-grad student at James Cook University, and she was actually studying these trees. She got stung by it. She said it's the worst pain you can imagine, like being burnt with hot acid and electrocuted at the same time, which is just mind-boggling to me. I mean, why somebody would say, I need something to compare this to. Let me get some hot acid and electrocute myself so that I know what this is like. I'm just assuming that in the name of science, she must have done that. Man, it's insane here.
Presumably she didn't get stung by it on purpose.
Presumably.
Like knowing, but they study things like this to see if there's any medicinal value to it, like you find out that certain poisons are good for treating migraines or whatever. So
like this is probably the cure for cancer all over that tree.
It would be unfair if it wasn't, right?
Right, it would, exactly.
It's got to
provide something, right?
Something major, like, instead of like curing warts or something, it has to be. It's like this is this thing. It's like what did God have in mind? And maybe it's just like, I don't know, but I can think of a lot of ways that someone with a not so great mind would use this.
Almost to answer your question, the British Army has some interest in this thing.
Here we go.
Right? Since as far back as the 1960s, the Chemical Defense Establishment at Porton Down, which is a top secret laboratory it's been known to develop chemical weapons, contracted a guy in 1968 asking him to provide specimens of this tree. So they want to study it. They want to look at how they can use it for nefarious purposes, of course. This guy that they asked, he's a professor of pathology in Queensland, and he said, well, chemical warfare is their work, so I could only assume that they were investigating its potential as a biological weapon.
Yeah.
So it probably is a cure for cancer, but the British intelligence needs it for James Bond type stuff, I can only assume.
I mean, we have conventions like, that, prohibit things like torture, right? So I cannot think of a legitimate reason for any military outfit to have used this.
No, I can think of plenty of reasons in my fiction that I'm going to use it, but
exactly. Yeah. It's like this is a tree that only exists for thriller writers so that we can torture people in the most agonizing way possible.
There's probably a himpy tree, which is the only known cure for the gimpy sting, but it's in the Amazon rainforest.
The shrimpy tree.
The shrimpy. Well, that's about all I can talk about that thing without going crazy thinking about how bad that would sting. You got something cool.
That was a worthy entry.
That's also real.
I shared a link because I just in case you needed to grab it for something else. And there's a video on the blog post that I sort of watched. But this is a weird science entry into the game. And this isn't the only. This is just one of several articles that I clipped to talk about it. But it's talking about acquired savant syndrome. Or what they call the accidental genius.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And this is always fascinating to me. And I write a lot of characters who are essentially savants. They have basically they have like a superpower of some kind, usually something involving their intelligence. Dan Kotler is an archaeologist, but he's also an expert, like a true expert on body language. Like he's a savant when it comes to body language. And I've always had a fascination with that sort of dormant potential that people have, and this is what this is about. So it starts off talking about a 10-year-old boy who's knocked unconscious by a baseball, and when he wakes up, he can do calendar calculations, and he can remember the weather for like any day within his lifetime. And let's see, it says along with other autobiographical details. So he can actually say, you can say January 4th, 2008, and he can tell you everything about that day.
Wow.
Including what the weather was, etc. I've seen, in this article, it talks about several people who've had these sorts of things, almost always stemming from some sort of brain injury. But, they're all in a lot of times it's things like mathematics and calendar dates, things like that. Sometimes it's, they get an eidetic memory out of the deal. I remember reading not too long ago about a woman who she'd had a car accident and had a head injury. And from that point forward, she literally could remember every detail that she'd been exposed to since birth. Of every day of her life. So people would quiz her all the time, and they'd ask her, they'd throw a date at her, and she could tell them what was on the news, what the anchors were wearing, what
verifiable facts.
Things that they can go back and check and verify. So
I thought it was things like, what'd you eat for dinner? And I'd be like, spaghetti. And there's just no way to.
And there are those, right? Who are like, they can only remember personal details, like what they were wearing, what they ate for breakfast. Nothing you could verify except maybe sidereal, if you happen to remember that I was wearing my Dr. Pepper t-shirt while standing in line at Astroworld in Houston, and the song Jesse's Girls.
I know you well enough to know that there was probably 20 years of your life where every day you were wearing a Dr. Pepper t-shirt standing in line at Astroworld.
I was either wearing a Dr. Pepper t-shirt or I was wearing a t-shirt stained by Dr. Pepper.
Yes. There was Dr. Pepper somewhere on the t-shirt. And you were at Astroworld. So this is my curse of this thing, man. Let's extrapolate here and say we got some scientist that figures out, okay, it wasn't the baseball over the head that did it, but it unlocked this key in the brain. And it'd be like The Boys, or any kind of created superheroes or mutants or whatever.
Right.
And they come up with some medicine, they give it to everybody that all of a sudden they can make you a savant. My curse would be that I would get like some super lame power, like being able to identify any plant. Like that's a gimpy tree. But I'd be like, well, I'm a musician. Yeah, right. Like, I'm a musician. Can I be a really much better musician? And they'd be like, no, sorry, you get plants. But it would be some useless thing for me, right?
The flip side of that is that there are people who have acquired Savant Syndrome who do become musicians or painters or sculptors, and they'll have like these remarkable shifts in their ability to do this stuff. One story I remember in particular, and this is from years and years ago, and actually I borrowed a term from this guy that I use all the time, but he was, I think he was like an accountant or something. I mean, he was, had nothing to do with art, but one day he just started painting, and he tended to paint in purple tones. And these paintings were just remarkable. Like they were just works of art, but he had never done any sort of art in his life up to that point. Now he started experiencing personality shifts and things like that. He left his wife and kids and hooked up with some painter commune or something, and he would have these days where he would say I feel closed, and he couldn't paint. And then on days when he could paint, he was open,
like some portal in his brain opened, and that's all he could see.
That's what's interesting to me about the whole acquired savant syndrome. It's like you have people who suddenly learn new languages that they've never spoken or even heard before.
Right.
Or
that's what this article says too. It's a lot of people that have had this sparing and disinhibition of science doctor of the right posterior neocortex. Stuff like brain hemorrhages and getting hit in the head with a baseball and all that kind of stuff seems to cause it. It's almost like somebody should, that would be evil. Well, I'll just go ahead and say it. Somebody should go ahead and just get a bunch of people and chunk baseballs at their heads and call it science and see if any of them come out to be savants and see where
they call that. Yeah, that's
to get hit with the baseball.
The National Baseball League. There have been experiments to try to test this sort of thing. Most of them are highly illegal, even if the subjects are volunteers. So because we have laws that protect people against this sort of thing. But it's fascinating, and of course, it makes a great topic for a thriller novel. Dibs. Dang it. I've written characters who are somewhat like this, but I've yet to write the one where the guy has taken gotten beamed in the brain and suddenly can calculate pi or to the billionth decimal or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Well, so kind of shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about something that neither one of us have touched. I don't think in any of our books. But I absolutely, God, I really want to use this somehow. There's a chemical called thioacetone. Okay. And it's got a, I don't know chemical symbols, but it's got a pretty unassuming symbol. You wouldn't think much of it. It has, like an S, and then just a couple lines underneath it. It looks like it's pretty simple, right, to put together. It's not like a ton of different components.
Right.
But this, let me just read you this here. In 1889, there's a factory in Freiburg, Germany, Freiburg, something like that, attempted to make this chemical, thioacetone, and their success, which is in quotes in the article, success, produced an offensive smell which spread rapidly over a great area of the town, causing fainting, vomiting, and a panic evacuation. Now, I latched onto the last couple words because I don't know if it was panically they evacuated the town, or did it cause an evacuation in every person out of panic? Both are amazing,
to the aroma.
Right. So exactly. But no, this is crazy. So one of these researchers, or a researcher later on, I think it was a British guy, they did some experiments with this thioacetone stuff. And they said a stopper jumped from one of the bottles, and just of residue, it wasn't even of the stuff, I guess. And they said, although we replaced it at once, it resulted in an immediate complaint of nausea and sickness from colleagues working in a building 200 yards away. This is considered the smelliest chemical compound on the planet. No one really knows. Sulfur is involved, so give you an idea of probably what it smells like. But nobody knows. The scientists studying it, they don't know how it actually makes its smell. They can't really take it apart. When they break it down, it becomes something different, is my understanding. And while that something different has a stinky smell, it's nowhere near what this thing is in its full, complete, perfect form.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, I'm just like, that's a whole new level of chemical warfare right there, right?
Yeah. But it reminded me of, there was, so I did not realize this, but there are actually different grades of mercury.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Certain grades are far deadlier than others. So the mercury in, say, your thermometer or whatever can be kind of toxic. It is toxic and can cause problems, especially mental health problems. If
I have
you're
heard that.
exposed to it. But there's a certain level. I mean, there's certain levels of mercury apparently that are far worse. This was only like a year or so ago, so I'd have to go hunt for this story. But she worked in a laboratory. She was wearing protective gear. I mean, just a hazmat suit, the kind of thing that you could handle nuclear waste and you're fine. And the smallest of drops of this particular mercury fell on the back of her glove, and she used an instrument to wipe it off and put it back in the container. And then she, exited. She had to go through she was in a clean room. So she left the clean room through basically an airlock where it was hosed down, cleaned, and then removed her gear, hosed down, cleaned again, exited, and went home. Within a day, she started feeling ill. Thought she had the flu, and then within a week, she was gone. I mean, her brain had been consumed. And so this mercury, basically, once it's in your bloodstream, all mercury, I've learned, once it's in your bloodstream, can start to multiply itself.
Really?
And
okay.
It reaches this stuff reached toxic levels within the day, basically. Essentially, once that tiny little droplet fell on her protected glove, she was done for. I mean, she was completely gone. So now I've thought about that. I want to find that story again.
I'd be interested in.
There is no, I mean, just an aerosol of the stuff just in their general vicinity would wipe out.
Right. And that's why this stuff is incredible, right? Like smell, what we smell, that's air particles, that things in the air that smell, right? It's not like all this, there's not this ether that is smell, right? That's what amazed me about this chemical thioacetone, because all these reports are like, 200 feet away, and it's like just a drop of this stuff. It's got to be more than that, it's got to be a whole vat of this or vial of this stuff is getting into the air. But I mean, I just can't imagine anything being not only, and I mean, I guess it is the strength of it, the potency of it, but I mean, can you imagine like a 5-gallon bucket of this stuff and just pour it into a gutter, pour it into a sewer line or something, or water treatment facility, and all of a sudden you've got a whole town shut down.
I could see, someone's plot is to use this to basically create a distraction, to run people off.
Be an interesting plot point.
Yeah.
And I don't know that, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily need to kill people. You just prevent them from doing anything. I mean, if they're vomiting, this thing causes you to vomit immediately, like more of it is going to cost more vomiting, which could cause death.
If your goal were, I'm an organization, and this town contains something I need, or is the gateway to something I need, and I want to clear the town, but I don't want to call attention to myself by killing people. I need people to leave voluntarily.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And basically, I'm trying to create a ghost town. Yeah. So having a spill of something, intentional or unintentional spill of something like this, most people would just leave without even questioning, like, what the heck was it? You wouldn't even probably get news coverage if it was, depending on where you were. I mean, maybe it would be something along the lines of there was this toxic smell and the whole town went away. It'd be a human interest story.
Sure.
And then, your team goes in there and yellow filtered suits and
exactly. Yep.
Moves the
kind
bars.
Ocean's 11 style. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love this one. That's kind of a cool thing. Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's crazy stuff, man. But thank you. That was enlightening in many, many ways. Now I want to go smell some sulfur and play with some mercury thermometers. And if you're listening to this, I hope that you want to go play as well. Most people that don't need to know about the Gimpy tree will never hear about it. And that's kind of a sad thing. We're hoping this podcast can be a way to share some of those interesting yet terrifying things with you. Thanks for listening, everyone. And do check us out online if you want to hear more about this kind of stuff. We've got more episodes coming down the pipe. And you can also find out a little bit more about Kevin and me, Nick Thacker, your hosts, what we've written, the stuff that we're planning on writing, and all of that is available or one click away if you go to stuffthat'sreal.com. But anyway, Kevin, you have a good week, and we will talk to you soon.
You too, Sir Nick. And talk to you all, listeners. We'll talk to you all next time.
Stuff that's real.